Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon. I'm a retired 27-year veteran of the NYPD. And tonight, this is going to actually be our third show in a series of shows we're doing to commemorate 9/11, and not to commemorate it in a celebration, but more or less to memorialize it so that we never forget this horrible day for our country. And folks, if you like Police Off the Cuff on YouTube, please subscribe, give us a thumbs up, ring that bell. We got some exciting things happening on this show, not even to mention having Bob Martin come on Thursday the 9th for the second time for the 9/11, the 20-year anniversary, which we're going to also commemorate and memorialize the great heroes from that day. With me tonight, straight out of Brooklyn, as always, is my partner, 21-year NYPD veteran, retired detective Phil Grimaldi, who's going to introduce our guest for you tonight. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Thanks, Bill. And we have a friend of mine, a person I've known for probably about 25, 30 years. He was a New York City housing cop. He's actually straight out of Brooklyn as well. So look out, because he's got that Brooklyn accent too. Anyway, he came on the job in 1985 in the housing police, and he was patrolling the projects in PSA 3, which covered Bedford, Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, Bushwick, Brooklyn, Red Hook, and Fort Greene. Real tough areas for the housing projects back in those days. They're probably a little bit nicer, those neighborhoods now, but that was tough times. In 1991, he rolled over to the fire department, where he landed at his home, Engine 205, Ladder 118. It's Fort Greene, Brooklyn Heights area. And then on the day that we're going to commemorate tonight, 9/11/2001, John was at Ground Zero. He spent about 9 months down there. He lost 8 firefighters from his firehouse, and it's just a touching, very, very sensitive. The minute that we see any pictures or stuff like that, we always get knots in our stomach around this time of the year. But we'll get into that. And around 2007, John developed some illnesses from 9/11 as well. But in 2002, he became involved in a charity called Friends of the Firefighters. One of the people on the board is Steve Buscemi. He's continued his charity work with them. He also retired from the fire department in 2010. And then in 2019, the photo on your screen, you see Pete Davidson, you see Bill Burr, Dominic Lombardozzi, and you see Steve Buscemi. And I believe that's John's wife in the middle. Is that your wife, John?
You are correct, Phil.
Okay, good. Well, John had the pleasure to work on that film, and he played Captain Palazzo of the firehouse, as well as he was a technical consultant. Now, I want you to know that when we asked John to send us a short bio, he's a very modest guy. He sent me 2 sentences, so I had to brush it up a little bit. But John Sorrentino, welcome to the firehouse. I mean, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, guys. It's my pleasure to be here.
Phil, if this was a firehouse, I would expect some good food to be delivered to us, you know?
You got that.
Oh, yeah, John knows about that. John certainly knows about that.
So, John, tell us about the movie you were in, since I'm going to put some of the pictures up on the screen. Some of our fans, subscribers, fans, whatever, they'd love to hear a little bit about that.
The whole movie experience really started because Pete Davidson's father, Scott, he worked in my firehouse, so we were good friends. And Pete's father was one of the guys from my house that died on 9/11. So I know the Davidson family. You know, I know Pete since he was born. In February of 2019, Pete sent me a text, and a few other guys, old timers that used to work with his father. He said, "I'm making a movie with Judd Apatow, and it's a little bit about the New York City Fire Department." So he wanted to meet some firemen, tell stories about his old man, and find out how the fire department operates. So I gathered up 4 or 5 old friends, and we met Pete, Bill Burr, Judd Apatow, Barry Mandel. He was the producer. We met at a diner downtown Brooklyn for a couple of hours, and we just swapped stories about Pete's father. We talked about the fire department. You know, we were just shooting the shit. We had a real good time. And afterwards, we took him to our firehouse and told him about 9/11. And I thought that would be the end of it. But then over the course of the next couple of weeks, I kept getting phone calls from Barry Mendel, who was the producer. He had questions about the fire department, basic stuff. What are your tours like? What's the difference between an engine and a ladder? Basic things that any fireman knows, but they really didn't have any clue. So between phone calls and emails, after a couple of weeks, Barry called me up. He said, listen, Judd would like to know if you'd like to be a consultant on the movie. Since we're bothering you so much, we might as well pay you to do it. So I said, sure, no problem. So I became a consultant, and it was all behind the scenes stuff, helping them develop scenes that anything had to do with the fire department. In this quick scene in the movie where we fight a fire, I got to coordinate that whole scene. Really interesting stuff. And then when it came time, they were casting for Firehouse members. Barry, the producer, called me up and he said, can you send me some pictures of guys in firehouses? We want to know what a typical firehouse looks like. Short, tall, white, black, men, women, whatever it is. We're a mixture. I sent them some pictures, and then I called them. I said, listen, as long as you're casting for firemen, I said, is there any chance I could audition for a role? I said, I don't know how to act. I've never done it before, but I could play a fireman. I did it for 25 years. I should be able to figure that out. So I didn't ask any favors. He said, okay. He set up an audition for me. I went for an audition with the casting director. Had 4 pages of dialogue that I had to memorize. So I did that with her. She said, okay, very good. Nice job. I'll forward your tape. The very next day, I get a phone call from her again. She said, the director saw your tape. He liked it. Can you come back in and read with Pete Davidson? I was like, yeah, sure. So 2 days later, I'm back in Manhattan and for my second audition. And when my time comes, they call me. I go in the room, and Pete didn't know I was coming because I didn't say anything because I didn't want any favors. I didn't want to put him on the spot. So he found it very funny that I was in there trying to audition for a role. So when we were doing the scene together, he couldn't stop laughing. Not that I'm being funny, but he just found it hilarious that it was me talking to him. And he was kind of blowing it for me. He was like, I'm so sorry. I'm messing this up for you. You're doing fine. I'm doing this all up. But we got through the scene, and then Judd Apatow, he said, listen, he goes, John, you're a fireman. Do the scene again, but say it any way you want to say it. You don't have to follow the script. Just make it sound like a fireman would say it. So I improvised it, and I just went off on a tangent. And whatever I said must have worked because they hired me, and I ended up not only being a consultant, I ended up being one of the firemen in the firehouse for the movie.
That's fantastic. One of the things that I don't know if people really understand that a non-fireman, non-police, they don't fully understand the camaraderie and that whole thing of that not leaving anyone behind and, being that brotherhood. And it's true on the police department too, but I think it's maybe even stronger on the fire department because you guys actually live with each other.
Yeah, I can tell because I did both jobs, and on the police, from my experience, the police department, you're real tight with the guys you work with. I mean, more, everybody, you see everybody, but you kind of work with a smaller crew. You're not working with the entire precinct most of the time, but you're tight with the guys. And, if you do play softball or whatever, you go out drinking after a night tour, whatever it is. But on the fire department, like you said, we live together, and we're together 24 hours a day. When we weren't working, same thing. We were doing a lot of extracurricular activities, but we knew the guys' wives. We watched their kids grow up, and it really is a brotherhood. And that whole movie crew, they kind of got to experience a little of it because we shot in a firehouse for 2 weeks. We shot in a firehouse in Staten Island. And so they got a taste of it, hanging out, not only myself, there were 3 other active firefighters portraying firefighters in the movie. Steve Buscemi was a fireman for 4 years back in the 80s. And all the guys who were working in the firehouse while we were filming. So that whole Hollywood cast, that crew, they got a taste of how close we actually are.
Norma Thomas, thank you so much for the 1999 Super Chat. And if you love firemen that much, I'll bring one on every week if you want.
John's already got a fan club. I don't believe
it's always like they always love firemen more than cops. Like, what are we doing wrong? It's like, one of those, I guess,
Bill, you want to know what it is?
Because you put out fires.
The difference is when someone calls the cops, somebody there doesn't want you there.
Yeah, that's right.
Someone's not happy to see you. When someone calls the fire department, they open the door for us, and and
they help you carry the hoses into the project.
That's right.
The difference.
You know,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Even that whole expression, putting out fires became metaphorical for
There you
solving problems too, right?
Right.
Not just literally putting out fires, but solving problems. People would say to me at work, "What are you doing?" "I'm just putting out fires today,"
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it just became a metaphor. So you guys, oh, Irish Gal, thank you so much for the 199 super chat. And you love firemen too. You have to rub it in, right, Irish girl?
I don't know what's going on
That's
between
okay.
Joe Murray and Dave Rader. They got their fan club.
Oh
Now
my
John
God.
Sorrentino's got a fan club. We're getting left in the dark.
I
we're
don't.
getting left in the dust here, Bill.
No, I think I have the least fans, Phil. You got your own little fan club too, the Joe Pesci lookalike fans that love you. They're all over. They're coming from all over the world. They're saying he sounds so much like Joe Pesci.
Gisela thinks that I'm like Robert De Niro. She said, I think I saw that. I think she said that when you were on her show. She was saying that she thought I was Robert De Niro. But it is what it is. I guess it's the New York accent,
That's what it is. John, it's such a great thing you do in this movie and things you've done post being a fireman and stuff. But tonight we have to sort of memorialize the 9/11 thing, and I know it's a painful thing for all of us to talk about. All three of us here, when 9/11 first responders. You probably even more painful because you lost, I believe, 8 friends that day. Well, more than that, but personally, that worked in your firehouse.
Eight guys from my firehouse, and probably about 60 guys that I knew, personally throughout the job.
It's amazing. Like, even some people sometimes would say to me, "Do you know so?" And I'm like, "Listen, before you get into that, do you know? Just realize there's 36,000 cops, And then when I do know the guy, I'm like, it's like amazing. I go, "Oh yeah, I know that guy." Or if they say the name Murphy or Kelly or whatever, there's 4,000 Murphys on the police department. There's 3,000 Kellys. It's like it's crazy. I'm sure the same thing with the fire department. It's a big time Irish job, probably a lot of Italian guys on that job, because the whole thing going down in the earliest century of pushing Irish immigrants and Italian immigrants for civil service, and it's carried on for years.
Oh, definitely, but it's changing. The city, with all city jobs, they're trying to make it more diversified. So the job has been changing over the years.
Nah, 100%.
John, do you know how many firefighters there were active on 9/11? Approximate number?
I guess at any given time, I'm going to say there's probably around 10,000 active, firefighters.
Okay. I mean, and on that day, they lost 343 guys. I mean, that was just so incredible. It was heartbreaking. And I mean, the NYPD lost like 23. The Port Authority police lost like 40. And the fire department took the heaviest hit. I mean, they were all in the buildings and stuff, and just horrible. I mean, I'm just trying to get an idea of, that's almost like, it's maybe close to like 5% of the fire department was killed on that day. I mean, it's crazy. If it was 10,000 members, it was close to 5%. I mean,
there was just a great story about some of the kids of the firefighters that died that day themselves going on the FDNY.
Yeah,
and that's the New York Post, and actually, two of the guys in that story are sons of two of the guys from my firehouse who passed away on 9/11.
Wow, that's amazing.
Wow, it's amazing to want to follow in the footsteps after such a tragic thing. But you know what? I get it. I understand it.
Look at how many young people joined the military after 9/11.
Absolutely,
that whole pride in our country, everyone got swept up in it. Too bad we don't still have that pride in our country. But a lot of people joined the military after that, and so you'd expect a lot of these sons and daughters of firemen and cops to want to follow in their parents' footsteps.
There was the football player Tillman that he turned away a tremendous contract to go join the military, and he was unfortunately killed.
Yep,
unbelievable.
Now, someone mentioned Captain Timothy Stackpole in the chat, and his brother worked with me in street crime.
Really?
A family that was in civil service, and I know Timothy Stackpole had gotten hurt prior to 9/11, almost could have got 3/4, and he didn't get off. He came back.
He got burnt. He got burnt very bad in a fire.
Yeah,
but he was so dedicated, and he loved his job so much that he would not retire. And actually, Timothy Stackpole was working at headquarters Marty Egan. He was our lieutenant, and he got promoted to captain a couple of weeks before 9/11. And he was at headquarters also that morning, and him and Stackpole drove down to Ground Zero together, and they both got killed.
Wow. That's I'm just going to share. I'm going to share the screen for a second, just to give everyone just an idea. And I know this is a horrible video, but I want to show it just so we can bring us back to that day 20 years ago. And I'm going to put it on the screen and play it.
I don't know. Come on. Let's just get back. Get back. You with me, John?
I just think there's going to be another explosion. Right?
Anthony, you okay? Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my
Building completely down.
Situation that started bad just gets worse and worse and worse. The World Trade Center.
Wow, if that don't give you the chills, nothing will.
I think, the people that aren't from New York that didn't experience that day, they get a feel from that to see from the ground level of what it was like. And, when you see the police and the fire department running towards that horror and everyone's running away, it gives you the sense of heroism.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we do. That's what we're trained to do, right? I mean, you guys on the police department, any given second, things could go south. I mean, you're living it, from the beginning of tour to the end of your tour. At least that's how I always felt. And on our job, it was, you could earn a year's salary in 10 minutes. You might do nothing all day long, then all of a sudden, 10 minutes later, you're in hell. But it's what we're trained to do.
The same is really true with the police department. You could be sitting in your car eating a coffee and a donut. I'll use that stereotype, although I know cops don't eat donuts. I know that firsthand.
How about a coffee and a cannoli? I like a cannoli.
If you're in Little Italy, you get a cannoli. You got to get coffee and a cannoli. But, and then things can go bad real fast. Whereas, I know Mark DeMeo does a comedy skit where he's in a radio car drinking coffee and a ham, egg, and cheese, and a heavy duty job goes on, and he goes, No one's throwing that coffee out the window. That coffee costs $3.50. You're putting the top on, you're wrapping up your bacon, egg, and cheese, and then you go in there slow. Once you have it all wrapped up, on TV, they throw it out the window.
Yeah. John brought up a really good point, how we're trained and we just know we're doing it. And on 9/11, I was fortunate enough to be at home when the buildings were hit and then the eventual collapse. But I had to leave. I had to get down there, and I knew I was going from the minute I saw it. And I had a struggle with my wife because, at the time I had 2 small children running around, toddlers in the house. And we're watching this on TV, and she's like, "You can't leave me. You're not leaving." I said, "No, I'm going," And she was hysterical. It took me about 10 minutes to convince her. I promised I'm going to come back. I'll come back in one piece. I gave her my word, and I was fortunate enough that I did. But I knew I was going there from the minute I was watching it. She actually woke me up when the first plane hit. She said, "I don't know, something happened." And next thing you know, everything unfolded. But I knew I was going down there no matter what. And I think, God had me in a place that I wasn't able to get down there before the collapse, thank God. And because I probably would have been, right there helping somebody. And I don't know if I had gone into the buildings. I mean, that was more of a fireman's thing, it seemed like. I wasn't ESU or anything like that. But I knew, and if it happened tomorrow, God forbid, I would get right down there too again. I would do it all over again.
100%.
You could think about how many off-duty firefighters were killed that day, because the way our tours work, your day tour is 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Your night tour is 6 p.m. to 9 a.m. So that covers the whole 24 hours. So the first plane hit at 8:46. So in all the firehouses across the city, you had guys who were just getting off work, who were working the night before, plus the guys who came in to start the day tour. So you had a double amount of guys in every firehouse. It was in between shifts. So when the planes hit and fire trucks started going down, there were off-duty guys jumping on the rigs with the guys who were on duty, and other guys jumping in their private vehicles, going down there. And like I said before, Stackpole and Egan, they were at headquarters and they drove down there. And a lot of guys, died who weren't even working that day.
John, that was also, when you think about it from an accountability point of view, that was why it was very difficult to know who actually was down there. Because firemen responded from their home and didn't stop in at a firehouse to check in. They just went straight there. And I don't know what your procedure, like the police department does rosters and stuff like that, but very well people could have not even gotten on a roster, right?
There was no playbook for this. They did a recall. I don't know if they did it with the police department, but they did it with the fire department. It went out over the television stations, the radio. All off-duty members report to your firehouse. I heard about all this stuff at a later date, but they really didn't have. There was no game plan for this. Obviously, look what happened. They set up their command post in the lobby of one of the towers. I don't remember which one.
Right.
Now you had these chiefs who were like the foremost experts in building collapse, building construction, anything like that in the world, these guys. So they didn't think those towers were coming down, obviously, although they would set up in the lobby of the building. And then with, so many guys just showing up and no one knowing where anybody was, it made it very difficult. I can remember the first couple of days afterwards, there was a list of about 500-600 names on it that they thought guys who might have died, because they just didn't know who was working, who wasn't working. Hey, I haven't seen this guy in 2 days. So-and-so was on vacation and nobody knew it. It was the first couple of days for sure. It was chaos. Nobody knew what they were doing. I can remember on September 12th. I think I went back to the firehouse like at midnight on the 11th just to take a shower. And early in the morning, we went back and we were going up to chiefs. What are we doing? What would you like us to do? Is there any plan for this? And they were, no one had an answer. So we were, you were on your own. One of the pictures I think I sent you was the sphere. That was that big sphere. It was in the courtyard in between the two towers. I think there was a waterfall feature, and that sphere was in the middle. And on the morning of the 12th, myself and 2 other guys from my firehouse. If you keep going.
There you go.
No, keep going. Nope. Maybe the next one. That one. See that's the sphere, that round thing. That was
Okay.
that was right in the middle of the courtyard between the two towers. So on the morning of the 12th, myself and two other guys, we were able to stretch a hose line all the way through all that wreckage to get to that sphere, and we were actually operating off the sphere because those fires were burning for weeks and months afterwards.
I know. I remember that. Yeah.
Be very careful. I mean, either heat was coming up and you didn't know it. Like you were walking into an inferno, and there were a lot of pockets of fire. So we were able to operate right from that sphere, and we were putting out small pockets of fire. Then we would crawl into these valleys and check for people, and we did that for like that whole day on September 12th. But there wasn't a chief on the job who told us to do that. We just took it upon ourselves. I mean, it was. You had to come up with an initiative, because I wasn't one of those bucket line guys. I just, I could not stand there in that line and just keep passing buckets. I couldn't do it. So we found other things to do.
John, I had, all of us worked on the pilot numerous times. And I was told by a guy who was like a mountain climber. There was a guy, remember there was a famous guy at Ground Zero, they called him the Mole. He was really small.
I remember.
He was also a mountain climber, and him and this other guy who was a detective, I think from the 6-7 squad, they climbed down into the guts of the World Trade Center to look for survivors. Yeah. And they said there were entire rooms that were intact, which I found like incredible, like voids, but they found absolutely not one person alive.
Below the World Trade Center was like a small city under there. The subway there was a lot of restaurants, shopping. There was a couple of levels of buildings. So that's what we were hoping for, because, obviously for the first couple of days, we were hoping and praying that we were going to find people alive. And honestly, I think the only people who survived the actual collapse there was a group of firemen in a stairwell where they were carrying down a woman, and the building collapsed, and somehow that stairwell remained intact, and they were maybe on the 4th floor on their way down, and they all survived. And I think later that afternoon they pulled some other guy out of the rubble, and I think there was a couple of Port Authority cops that were trapped, right? I think they even made a movie about that. Yeah. But other than that, you heard a lot of stories of, oh yeah, this guy rode the collapse down 80 stories and he ended up out in the street. That was all nonsense. Nobody survived that, but that's what we were thinking about underground. We got down there pretty good too, and there was nothing down there. But there was Phil, we talked about this not too long ago. There was it might have been, it was like you saw those buildings pancake collapse and they were squished, but there was maybe 2 stories that you could, if you climbed over enough stuff, you can get into the building. And we got into one office, and it was amazing because the guy's desk, everything on his desk was still there, his chair. I mean, if whoever was in that office would have sat in that chair, they would have survived the collapse. It was crazy.
Unbelievable. I think the thing you were talking about, John, is I was on West Street. It was probably maybe a weekend over by where the Marriott was, and there was a piece of the building that was kind of tilted, and it looked like a good section of the building, and I was just staring at it. I didn't even know what I was looking at, and somebody came over to me, I believe it was a fireman, and he said, "Do you know what you're looking at?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "That's 9 floors." And I said, "What do you mean?" It looked like one solid piece. It was probably about, I don't know, maybe 25 feet up in the air. And he goes, "No, look." And there were lines. And what happened was the concrete floors that were, I guess, about 18 inches wide, when they pancaked down, they like became one, but you could see the lines. And I think it was either 7 or 9 floors, he was telling me. And I just couldn't really absorb what I was seeing. It was 9 floors of the building, and it was just there, and it came down, and I don't know which part of, maybe it was floor 10, 11, 12, or up to, whatever it is, or it could have been, 91, 92, 93. I don't even know what it was, but just obviously nothing could have survived that. And then also in that spot, they took out, there was a crushed, it was a fire, the bosses, what do they call that? The chauffeur's car, John?
What, the battalion?
Yeah, it wasn't a fire truck. It was just an emergency vehicle, and it was all crushed to smithereens, and just really. And then you were talking about the fires. I remember walking from everybody walking on the pile. It actually almost made like from their feet stamping down on all the debris. It made like little roads. And I was walking on it, and you would see like smoke just billowing out of the different areas from the fires that were burning underneath,
Yeah,
And I can remember the Deutsche
Go ahead.
Bank building. I would stand over by the Deutsche Bank building, and it was a firehouse like a few doors down from there. And I was looking down from the top of the pile down into the lobby of the Deutsche Bank building. And the lobby's got to be about 2 or 3 stories. So that's how high up the pile was where I was at that particular moment,
Open Minds, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. We're going to go to a quick commercial and John, if you have to go to the bathroom or whatever you got to do it now. The other thing is, folks, this is a 20-year anniversary of 9/11. And rather than celebrating this, we're trying to memorialize it with as much respect to the folks that responded and those that lost their lives as we possibly can. And we really thank you guys for listening in. And this was a reality for pretty much every fireman in New York City back in 2001 and every cop in New York City. And these memories aren't pleasant for us, but we like to report this to memorialize the folks that responded and who gave their lives that day. Philly, I'm going to pull up your...
Go ahead, Bill. Are you tired of the same old surroundings? Are you looking to relocate? Or are you just in need of a real estate agent in the Myrtle Beach, South Carolina area? Well, Carol Waters is your girl. Her and her husband, Rob Mahan, who's a retired member of the NYPD and the New York Fire Department, they're both $1 million sales agents. Carol and her husband, Rob, can be reached at 914-261-6681. That's 914-261-6681. Or you can email her at carolwaterssalesmb@gmail.com, carolwaterssalesmb@gmail.com. One of our clients was quoted as saying, she always goes the extra mile. Joe Murray, attorney at law. Boy, Joe, we're praying for you to get better. We had a good report that you're doing a little better today. Keep up the good work. Have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in need of legal counsel in the New York area? Do you need a victim's advocate? Well, Joe Murray is your man. He's not only an experienced trial attorney, he also has 15 years experience as a member of the NYPD. He knows both sides of the fence. His website is jmurray-law.com. That's jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702, 646-838-1702, or you can email Joe at joe@jmurray-law.com, joe@jmurray-law.com.
Folks, Police Coffee is an officer-owned business dedicated to catching the finest coffees and blends. They will provide you with the freshest coffee available. Each batch is roasted fresh by people who know what it means to stay vigilant. And our specialty coffees do not waste one drop when flavor is concerned. Our coffee is some of the best you'll find, but it also helps to serve an important cause, giving back to our community. 50% of our profits go towards helping family members of police officers who fell in the line of duty. To order coffee and related products from policecoffee.com, go to the website. There are over 7 types of coffee to choose from. 50% of the profits go to officers' families in need. For a 10% discount, use code OTC10. That's off the cuff 10. I personally bought this coffee. It's fantastic. I'm gonna reorder it as soon as I use it all up. I haven't used it all up yet, but it's as good as any coffee I've ever had. If you're looking for supplements, be sure to check out the products from firstdonutrition.com. As first responders, there are certain expectations on our performance on the job. We train hard and drill often to be able to perform at our best when duty calls. Whether it's hoofing over 100 pounds of gear or engaging in a spontaneous foot chase, we work out like our life depends on it, because it does. 2 New York City firemen created the supplement line with hand-picked products that will not pop positive on any drug test for first responders. Solid pre-workout products will give you a good pump and a short-term strength boost that can help you power through your workout. Supplements that help with fat burning and weight loss, and post-workout formulas that support recovery. Go to firstdonutrition.com. Use code OFFTHECUFF to get 10% off your order. John, we're going to get into you were from that famous firehouse that it was known as Engine 205, Ladder 118. And we mentioned before the dubious distinction of 8 members of your firehouse were killed during 9/11. But there was a famous picture of them, I believe, crossing the Brooklyn Bridge in the fire engine. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that became like almost an iconic photograph that day. And I didn't find it, but I think this is the Daily News.
Right. That's the cover of the Daily News. I think that's October 5th, 2001. I sent you the actual color picture too. I don't know if you have it. That's our firehouse door. That door is actually hanging in the museum, the 9/11 museum right now.
Okay, I don't know. I mean, this is just the, I don't know if it was the funeral or.
For a second at that picture. That picture is from, we had a firehouse memorial service October 11th, 2001. We had one memorial service for all 8 guys who died. And you see me saluting in the background of that picture. If you go back to that other picture, Bill.
Sure. I'm sorry. Oh, I'll get it. Screwed it up. Sorry.
That's all right.
That one. I don't know why I'm not seeing it right now.
Was that Pete?
Yeah,
There you go.
Yeah, that's me. So that's me in uniform, and that's Pete Davidson in that photo right there. That's Pete's uncle holding him. So, it's crazy how life intertwines with itself, right?
Yeah.
But
anyway,
he was, well, obviously that's 20 years ago. So I don't know what age he was.
He was 7 years old.
7 years old.
Yeah, and he also, Scott also had a 4-year-old girl, Casey, too, at the time. But that picture you're referring to, the cover of the Daily News, the story behind that is there was a guy named Aaron. He was in Brooklyn, with stone's throw from Manhattan. He was on the roof of a building, and he was just taking pictures that morning. So a couple of weeks after 9/11, he came by the firehouse, and I just happened to be there, and he handed me the photo. He goes, I'm not sure. He goes, but this might be your fire truck. So we had to get our magnifying glasses and double check, because we have a toolbox that we made for ourselves that's attached to the outside of the fire truck. So we knew it was ours. So if you look at that photo, that's ladder 118 going over the Brooklyn Bridge. You see the towers burning in the background, and those 6 guys, are driving to their deaths, basically. So that became an iconic photo, and it's really, that photo is a symbolism of the bravery of all the first responders who were there that day.
That's incredible. That's an incredible, like you said, an iconic photo. Totally incredible how they were looking at those buildings burning, and
knew when they were going in.
They didn't know. I mean, I guess the whole thing was so unprecedented, and like you said earlier, nobody knew what to do. There was really no playbook on something like this. But I guess everybody just tried to do their best,
Yeah, I think the hard part was, like I said before, I don't think at that time anybody really thought those buildings were going to collapse. But also, in all the firemen minds, at least, there was no way to put those fires out, because the sprinkler systems were destroyed when the planes crashed. There's a standpipe system, for people who don't know. It's basically hollow pipes that go from the ground floor up to the roof, and it's a city-fed water main. So you'll see them in stairwells, all those pipes. So we can go into a stairwell on any floor and hook up our hoses, and we got water. Those standpipes were destroyed. So that you can't. How you getting water up 70, 80 flights of stairs? Those fires were really going to have to burn themselves.
Yeah,
so
right.
It was just the whole day was just truly chaotic and frustrating. There wasn't much like I said, we all went in there to do what we could, but
that's crazy. Uno Who, thank you so much for the 1999 super chat. She quotes, "You are all true warriors." Thank you so much, Uno Who.
Thank you, Uno.
And we
you.
also just want to really salute all the families that lost loved ones on that day. And, not just, I mean, look, the first responders, of course, they were running in when others were running out. But there's people that deserve kudos in their family just for going to work that day and doing what a good citizen does, going to work. And they lost their lives. Who expected terrorists to use our, commercial airlines basically as bombs to take down these buildings. You know, it's just a horrendous thing. And you know, and the word, everyone heard this word before and after, the surreal. That's how everyone described it. It didn't
100%.
seem real at all, right? When you were
100%.
walking down there. But you know what? I just want to mention some of the good things about it. If there was any light at the end of the tunnel, it was that the camaraderie and the respect that the citizenry had, both for the FDNY and for the NYPD and the Port Authority police and EMS and the court officers, all the first responders that went down there. It was sort of a good feeling that how the city felt about you, maybe for about 3 weeks. Then they went back to hating you again. You know.
Well, I can remember, you know, everyone wanted to help. I mean, obviously, you know, I had, you know, friends and relatives begging me to get me into Ground Zero so I could help out, you know, which wasn't going to happen. But, you know, you had people lined up in the streets all over the area near Ground Zero. And, you know, you spend 15 hours in that pit and then come out of there. And now you're walking down the street, you know, heading to the subway to, you know, to get back to the firehouse, and people are just clapping for you. And, you know, that was, I think, you know, people who wanted to get involved, who didn't know what to do, the people who went down there and was just cheering on all the first responders that were working down there, that was their way of helping out. So it was really, you know, that meant a lot. That's something that kept us going. And,
you know, for sure, you know, that was for sure that really did help a lot, because it was a lonely feeling. I'm sure going into those buildings, working the pile. I mean, people were just like sort of mesmerized by the heroism of cops and firemen and all the people that were trying to recover. And literally, firemen had relatives, brothers, you know, family members that they were searching for.
There were guys who carried Vigiano was his name. I can't remember.
Yes.
I think
Joe Vigiano and his brother.
One was a cop and one was a fireman.
Yeah.
I got that right? They both, you know, they both died. He was, you know, I think he got to carry them out. Yeah.
The father was searching for his sons. He was retired. The father was a retired fireman, and Joe Vigiano was an ESU cop, and the brother was a fireman. They were both killed on that day. I actually got promoted with Joe in April of 2001. I got promoted to second grade, and Joe got second grade as well. And he was in uniform. We were like, "Who is this guy?" You know. And then when we heard the backstory, he was really a hero. He had been several shootouts. He had combat crosses. He had been shot. And when Kerrick became the police commissioner, he wanted to go to emergency service. So Kerrick put him there, had worked with him and knew he had been in these shootouts. He worked in the 7.5 and stuff. And Joe, unfortunately, he had the day he got promoted on April. It was April 12th, 2001. There was a video team that was following him. They were doing a documentary on his life. And unfortunately, he perished on 9/11 along with his brother. And I believe his father was there when they carried the bodies out. Is that what you were referring to, John?
Yes. Yeah, he was down there every day because he wanted to be there when his sons were found.
Yeah, it was funny because when I got promoted, Kerrick would bring, like, they would do a promotion of second grade and first grade detectives. He would, like, was 20 guys that you'd have to go to his office, and he would meet with you, and he'd just like shoot the shit with you a little bit. So now there's all these detectives. I've been in the bureau already about 11, 12 years, and here's this guy in emergency service in uniform. So, I mean, I didn't really think it, but he said it to me afterwards. He's like, "Yeah, you guys are all looking at me like, you know, because it was a few days before the ceremony, but at the ceremony, Kerrick called him out and made him get a standing ovation from everybody in the room. They mentioned a few names. They even mentioned my name because I had a combat course. They mentioned all the names of high medal people that got high medals in the police department. And he goes, but now I'm going to tell you about Joe Vigiano, and he shot off all the things that he accomplished in his career. And, you know, the whole room he stood up and the whole room just gave him applause. And he came over. I'll never forget. He came over. He goes, "Yeah, you were looking at me that day like, hey, who's this ESU guy getting grade?" You know, but I think he got shot twice, if I'm not mistaken. And unfortunately, he perished. But those are true heroes. Those are true
Absolutely.
heroes. And I was honored to be promoted to grade on that day with him. It was just an honor. I'll never forget it.
You know, Uno who asks, what will it take to bring us together now, I wonder? And, you know, that's as good a guess, you know, that's a good question. But it does seem like our country is fractured right now into different sort of factions. And we saw, of course, what just happened in Afghanistan. And that's heartbreaking for all of us 9/11 responders, knowing that, that we were there to try to prevent another terrorist attack, because that's like the training grounds for terrorists. And now that we left there, and not that I think we should nation build and stay there forever, but we know how, terrorists come into this country. And now it seems like the borders are open. And what will it take to bring us all together again? I don't know.
Bill, I'm glad you brought that up, because I got to say this. The same people that are out protesting for the last 2 years, those were the people that were standing on the West Side Highway. And I think, John, you touched on it a little bit. They were holding signs. I mean, legitimately, hookers were holding signs. You're our heroes. And people that, people that look like, people of the night, drug addicts, whatever, just people that wouldn't be cheering you on if that horrible thing didn't happen. And it was like, you kind of felt good about it. I mean, there were American flags on it and on every car. And then about 2 months after the disaster, I'll never forget this. I had gone into the cleaners, and this young girl there, her name was Erica. I hope she's watching some way, somehow, but she was like 16 years old. And she looked at me when I was getting my clothes, and she caught me off guard. She goes, "Thank you." I go, "Thank you for what?" Like, she's, "No, I want to thank you. You're our heroes." She knew I was a cop. And I was like taken back by it. I got choked up. This little 16-year-old kid is thanking me. It was really, it just made you feel good. The country did come together at that time. Right now, we're split. It's terrible. We don't want another tragedy to bring the country together. There should be other ways to do it. But yeah, for a while there, the country, we couldn't have been more on the same page. Even the Dems and the Republicans, all the politicians were even together at a point. But then we fractured off, and we need something good, not a tragedy, to bring us together. Maybe some term limits, or some good elections. Vote who you don't like out, and try to vote somebody in that's good.
Well said, Phil. I always said 9/11 was the worst of humanity, followed by the best of humanity.
Yeah.
And that got us through it. And unfortunately, it seems like in the history of our country, it seems to always be tragedy is what brings us together. And it sure would be nice if it was, if we could all get on the same page for something good as opposed to something so tragic.
100%. This is a 9/11 Heroes Run. San Antonio, Texas A&M University. Someone just sent me that. I just thought it was interesting that folks are having these memorial runs and stuff in all parts of the country. People are not forgetting that, and that's a great thing. Then there's that other one, the Tunnel to Towers, where I think the head of that, he was walking from, I think, Washington to Ground Zero on 9/11. He's going.
Oh, that's the brother. That's the brother that runs the foundation.
That's the father.
Yeah.
The father is doing the walk.
So that's
tremendous. The dad? Isn't it the brother?
I think it's the father.
Okay.
He started in Washington, D.C., and I know he made it to Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where Flight 93 crashed. And I think he'll be back in New York the 9th or the 10th. And along the way, I've just seen it today, because along the way they had ceremonies, parades, whatever they could do. The Tunnels to Towers Foundation has raised a lot of money, and we've helped a lot of people over the years.
That is a fantastic charity. Fantastic.
The other
they
thing
raise
that
money for cops, firemen, warriors. I'm sorry.
No, the other thing I wanted to mention, and we mentioned it one of the other times, and not to be sour grapes, but John Stewart, I think we all have to take our hats off to him, because he fought really hard for us to keep the 9/11 fund for the healthcare of the responders, of many who are so deathly ill right now with cancers that they've never seen before. And he actually went to Congress to shame these politicians into voting for it. And it's another 5 years. So every 5 years they have to re-up this bill. This should be forever, for
I
the
think
lives.
the last time that go ahead.
Add another name to that, John Stewart. Also, John Field.
Yeah,
he was
just going to bring him up.
Worker, and he lost part of his foot during 9/11, and he hooked up with John Stewart, and I think it's the Feel Good
Foundation. Yeah, Feel Good Foundation. I know John. I met him a few times. Great guy.
He was the man who kind of put all that together with John Stewart, to
Yep.
get all the cops and firemen who kept going down to Washington D.C. to hound these politicians to wake them up. But I think now that bill was passed, I don't think that are they still? I don't think they do that
No,
5-year thing.
It's funded
fully
to like
funded,
2080 or something like
yeah,
that. It's, yeah.
Oh,
Right.
it is. They did
Yeah.
fund it for longer.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So
that was the last thing that they did.
back to Washington for this, beg for money to, for people who are getting sick due to 9/11.
Well, if
Crazy.
you remember, Lou Alvarez, who was in the bomb squad, his last few days of life on this earth, he went and testified with John Field and John Stewart. And that was the big push, that they didn't want a 5-year extension of the bill. They wanted it forever until everybody's off the earth that was affected by it. And I think it's like 2080 or something like that. The bill is good for, to keep us, with the 9/11 screenings, the World Trade Center program, the annual screening, all the medications. And so, yeah, all of us are obviously, us three are all part of that. And that was a great thing. But yeah, Lou Alvarez, what a warrior. What a warrior. He struggled with that. He would post every day on Facebook, and, all of those guys. Big thank you to those guys, the Silla Foundation, John Field, John Stewart. I know Gary Sinise raises a lot of money for the Wounded Warriors as well.
Yeah, he's amazing. Danny Turner, Bill and Phil. I met Joe in 1998 at a FBI SWAT school at Camp Smith in Peekskill. He was one of the NYPD's most decorated members at age 34.
Right.
His two oldest sons, Joseph and Jimmy, are now MOS serving with NYPD. What a legacy. Truly proud to have met and trained a few weeks with him. Never forget.
Yeah,
great.
That's right. That's something I left out. He was the most decorated police officer, I believe, on the day he got promoted with me. He was the most highly decorated cop on a job. He'd been in so many shootouts. But what were you going to say, John? We interrupted you a little there.
Just whatever we were just speaking about. If there's anyone out there, cops, firemen, any first responders, anybody really who was affected with their health due to 9/11, I hope you guys are going for your yearly medicals and, following up with your doctors. I mean, we talk about it once in a while, Phil. I got several things wrong with me. And I have a lot of friends who are sick and a lot of guys who died, and you gotta stay on top of it. You got to go to your doctors. You got to get your checkups.
John, I just went today.
Today.
How apropos was that? But the other thing I want to shout out to also, and they're not specifically first responders, but they were heroes nonetheless, were the steel workers.
Oh,
they were just amazing. And they were the ones that moved and cut those big pillars of steel. And there's a lot of guys there really sick too, and
the numbers of people lost after post 9/11, not lost on that day, are getting almost to the point of the same number of people that were killed. I believe the original number was like 2,700 and change people killed on 9/11 between Shanksville, the Pentagon, and Ground Zero. And the number is inching closer and closer. The people are dying. And, I talked about it before. I actually shaved my head a couple of weeks back for a guy, Joe Ponzi, who developed, non-smoker, developed lung cancer, and he was down there at Ground Zero, and they're pretty certain it was tied to that. So, good point, John. Everybody's got it. It took me a few years. I was getting the paperwork and started in 2003, and I had issues right from 2002, 2001, but I kept putting aside, and then finally 2007 is when I started the screenings, and it probably saved me from, because my breathing, a lot of my ailments got better, so it was definitely the right move to go to the World Trade Center screening.
John, I'm going to put up the pictures of the 8.
Yeah, that's that picture right there. If you want to stop for 1 second, those are the 8 guys from my firehouse who died on 9/11, and we recovered 6 out of the 8. There's 2 guys, Leon Smith and Bobby Wallace, that we never found their bodies. So it's as horrible as this whole tragedy is, it's even that much more tragic for their families, because we never recovered their bodies. They don't have a place to go.
John, you want to just actually, in honor of them, just read their names?
Sure. That's Vernon Cherry. He was almost a 30-year veteran. He was actually the official singer for the fire department. He sang all the national anthems at all the events. Leon Smith, another guy, he had over 20 years of service. Leon, we always said Leon was holding up those towers so everybody else could get out. He was a mountain of a man, a sweetheart. Bobby Wallace was our lieutenant. His tragic story was he was on medical leave during September, and he fought with the doctors. He wanted to go back to work because that's the craziness of our job. Everybody wants to work.
You know, you never hear a cop do that. A cop gets 3 quarters, is like, where's the door? You know?
his first tour back was 9/11, and he got killed. Marty Egan, we talked about before. He was at headquarters. Bobby Regan, if you, I'll tell you guys, you know, a real quick story about the guys on the bottom. Marty Egan we recovered his body probably like the first week. And then Scotty Davidson, maybe a couple of weeks later, and then nothing. We never recovered any more guys from our firehouse, but it wasn't until right around Christmas, Marty Egan's brother, Mark, who became a lieutenant, was assigned to Ground Zero. He called the firehouse one day, and I wasn't working, but I was in there, and he called us up. He said, "Hey, we just found Vernon Cherry." So we were like, "Listen, don't move him. We want to come down there. We want to carry him out." Because our firehouse, we were in lower, Brooklyn Heights, downtown Brooklyn. We're at Ground Zero in 5 minutes.
Right.
So both fire trucks, me and a couple other guys were off duty. We jumped on the fire trucks. We drove down to Ground Zero. And when we got there, we were met by the chief who was in charge of Ground Zero at the time. I won't mention his name. And he went ballistic on us. He goes, "You guys are working in Brooklyn. You just can't come here. What's wrong with you guys?" Started screaming at our captain. And our captain said, "Guys, go ahead, go do what you got to do. I'll stand here and take the heat." And we were able to go into the pit and carry Vernon out. And our captain caught some flack for that. But after that day, the fire department changed their procedure, and they started allowing companies to go out of service to go down to Ground Zero if someone from their firehouse was recovered, so the guys from that company could carry their own member out. Because, I mean, that was like our main goal for us. We wanted to bring our guys back to their families, and we wanted to be the ones carrying them out. We got to do that with all of them except the 2 we didn't get. And quick story with Bobby Regan. I found his body, and he was still wearing he had I think it was a St. Christopher necklace on. And I was going to take it to make sure his wife got it, but I didn't want some stranger seeing me, "Hey, this guy just stole someone's necklace." So I put it in his shirt pocket, and his next day, his wife got his necklace back, and she was, had a very emotional conversation with her about that. So just eight fantastic guys. Out of those 8 guys, you're looking at, I think, 20 children who lost a father that day, just in that one photo. So picture, multiply that 343, and plus all the cops, and that's to bring the tragedy, it makes it very personal. But I've been telling my 9/11 story for 20 years, and the only reason I do it, and I'll talk about it to anybody. I mean, it bothers me to talk about it, but it's also like a therapy for me. But Joey Agnello, he had 2 very young children when he died. I think his son was maybe 3 or 4, and his other son, I don't even think was a year old yet. And his wife came up to me one day, not long, maybe a couple of months after 9/11, and she said, "When they get older, the only stories I'm going to be able to tell about their father and what he did on 9/11 are the stories that you're telling now. All the TV interviews you do and the newspaper articles. She goes, I save all those things. So now, now it's 20 years later. So, I'm hoping that she amassed a nice collection for her kids to appreciate what their father did. And our saying, never forget. And it's not just a saying, we believe it, so thank you for doing, a night like tonight to remind people of what happened that day.
I think it's so important to commemorate it. And I know there's almost like a faction, it seems, of politicians that don't want to keep remembering this in the way that people demand to remember it,
Yeah, look at. I mean, if you can remember back to 9/11, I think it was during Christmas time. I don't know who it was, but they were getting fed up that it was taking so long for the cleanup. We were. I don't know how much time you guys spent down there, but they would set up areas, and then a crane would come and scoop up a bunch of debris, and it would come and they would lay it in this one area. And we would all just sift through it. And after we were done sifting through it, then another crane scooped it up and threw it in the dump trucks, drove it out to Great Kills, and then they went through it with a fine tooth comb out there. And after, I think, like I said, around Christmas time, whoever the powers that be were getting frustrated, and they started doing away with that, and they just started taking clumps of steel and just throwing it straight into the dump truck before we had a chance to go through it. And you know, when you got all that metal, twisted cement, all that stuff, you don't know what body parts could be in there. And there was a big, I don't know if you guys remember, I mean, a couple of firemen got locked up.
I remember that. Yeah.
There were a few tussles, yeah.
You know, like the cops were put in a bad position because they were told to keep us out. All of a sudden, they put in a fence around the place, and they were trying to control it. So, you know, that alone was a horrible thing.
Well, you know, John, they would throw a lot of the debris on barges and float it to Fresh Kills, and we would sift through it at Fresh Kills, which was a pretty horrible detail to do, because I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's like it's like the Addams Family. There's like you see smoke coming out of water, you know, and you're like, what? The methane gas coming up through the ground, and it's probably
that's
the most unhealthy place you could be in the world, other than Ground Zero, you know, just probably as bad or worse, you know. But you're right, they recovered full bodies at Fresh Kills.
Yeah.
So the people that were rushing this recovery, you know, they didn't realize the emotion too for you guys, you know, trying to recover your brother fireman. Police for the same thing, and you know, and regular everyday citizens too. It's like these are people that have families that are demanding closure, and some of them, you know, Dr. Hirsch, who was the chief medical examiner back in 2001, Charles Hirsch, he gave some amazing lectures, and he had lectured all over the world after 9/11. And I had heard at one time he gave a lecture to 1,200 pathologists in like Italy or somewhere. Say it was, I don't know exactly what country it was. And after it was over, he got a standing ovation. But one of the things he said, which always bothered the family, was that, I hate to say this, but many of the bodies were vaporized, and you're never, ever going to find them, because there was never, ever this kind of force falling in a downward motion for 110 stories. That has never happened in the history of man. So a lot of people didn't want to hear that, but it was, and in fact, a reality, you know.
Yeah, bodies were either pulverized, or also with those fires burning for months. If a lot of bodies probably just, you know, depending on where they were located in relationship to fires, were just incinerated and turned to ash over the course of weeks and months. I mean, I'm the liaison for one of the families. You know, one of the families of the firehouse had a hard time dealing with this whole thing. So I was the liaison. I did all the stuff I could for them. I was the medical examiner, go-between. And, you know, I still get calls. I got maybe 2 years ago was the last call I got, that they recovered, they identified another body part of so-and-so. I mean, it could just be a bone chip or whatever it was. And I actually just read an article the other day that there's a new form of DNA testing that's super, super successful, and now they're going to retest whatever they have, because still about half the people who died haven't been identified, and most of those remains are actually, for people who don't know, there's a morgue inside the museum at Ground Zero, and that's where all the body parts are kept.
I think there's like 1,200 parts or pieces that they never were able to identify.
Yeah,
that might be the pieces you're talking about. And
you know, the procedure at the morgue was they would photograph the body part, they would x-ray it, and then they would take DNA from it. So it was a 3-part procedure. But I remember one time they just put a foot on there that was inside a sneaker. And that's when I knew I was working at the morgue after Ground Zero, to see something like that. And it was so, you know, I was in homicide too, and I worked in the 223, so I'd seen a lot of murders, but I had never seen bodies in this condition in my entire life, and seeing body parts like that. And it was even sort of shocking to me, you know.
Yeah, I mean, Bill, there were things that I saw that, you know, I'll never get them out of my head. I'll never discuss them, but it's heartbreaking that it wasn't real. And I was thinking even this morning, today. It was a beautiful sunny day, not a cloud in the sky. And every time it's one of those days, the first thing I think about is this is exactly the weather on
9/11. Yeah, that's right.
It not necessarily makes me sad or anything like that, but
It takes you right back to it. It brings you right back.
Just even some days it bothers me all day. Some days I just think about it for a second. But today specifically, because I knew I was going to talk to you guys tonight, all of us, it was that 9/11 day, and I can remember, the beautiful morning, and I can remember driving over the Brooklyn Bridge into Lower Manhattan, and once you got into Manhattan, it was like entering the movie set of a sci-fi movie, with dark skies, couldn't see in front of your face, and then when you got actually to the pit, it was just, all the pictures you put up and videos and whatever everybody's seen, it still doesn't convey what it was really like unless you were there.
100%. I always say that, John. The television coverage, news coverage, if you were there, you understood it at a different level. It's the things you saw were horrible, but when you were there and the World Trade Center was at your feet, then you really saw it. And John, I think we talked about a story that you had gotten a phone call. You were actually supposed to be working that day. You want to tell us about that real quick?
Yeah. I got off work the morning of September 10th. So I worked a 24-hour tour Sunday morning into Monday morning, the 10th, and I got off work. And to this day, I can't tell you what I did on September 10th, where I was that day, that night. Your life before 9/11 and after 9/11 is almost like two different lives, at least for me anyway. And I had a cell phone, and I had my own apartment, and I was with someone at the time, and I got a phone call that I didn't even know till about 2 weeks later. I came home and I checked my messages, and it turned out I got a phone call at about 7:30 in the morning to come in to work overtime. And I never got the call because instead of calling my cell phone like they usually do, they called my house phone and left me a message. So if they would have called my cell phone, I would have went into work and I wouldn't be here today talking to you guys. It was just on our job, like I was saying before with our tours, it was, we have a very flexible schedule on the fire department. You could take, if you want a day off, you just get a body for a body. Hey, work for me today, I'll work for you tomorrow. So there were a lot of guys who died on 9/11 who weren't, quote unquote, scheduled to work that day. And, and that's kind of like my story. If a phone call to the wrong phone saved me from working that morning, I would have been on that truck.
You would have been on that truck going over the Brooklyn Bridge.
It's amazing.
And I'll tell you, even like other stories. Danny Sir was the first fireman killed on 9/11.
First casualty, yeah.
His fire company hooked up with my the engine 205, the engine in my firehouse, and now both companies were going into one of the towers, and on their way in, a jumper landed on Danny, and it pretty much killed him instantly. But for the time it took, now, you're talking about two companies, you got, 10 firemen, 10, 11 firemen. But at the time it took those guys to pick him up, to get him into an ambulance, during that time, that tower collapsed. So, Danny tragically died, but his death saved the lives of 10, 11 other guys that they all would have died if they would have got into that tower.
Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories, and we're sort of not commemorating but memorializing this the 20-year anniversary of 9/11. And John Sorrentino, I mean, you're a strong guy, man, to be able emotionally to be able to handle all the stuff that you were put through on 9/11, even post 9/11. It's heartbreaking. And I mean, I did another show a while ago with Bob Martin, and we got all like choked up, and he was reading like poems about Moira Smith's daughter, and I was like, that was it.
God.
And I was just like, and he's actually going to come on Thursday, and he's going to, he has the book out, 9/11, 20 years later, and we're going to do one more memorial show, and then I don't think I can do any more. It's, it's just, it's pretty tough to do this, but I think it's really important to do this. And I think it's really important that this city and this country never, ever, ever forget this. And when people move to try to make us stop memorializing. I get crazy. You know, I think it's just so wrong. They have to let people continue to grieve if that's what they want to do. They let them and sponsor. I remember a few years ago, Bloomberg didn't want the names read anymore of the people that died, and I think the family members went ballistic.
Wasn't it last year? I think it was last year that they didn't want to do it because of COVID, and then the Silla Foundation stepped up and said, you know what, we're going to do it ourselves. And then they were setting it up to do it themselves, and then the city, because of the Silla Foundation, the city had to change their heart.
Yeah, because they got embarrassed. Because they were embarrassed. They were shamed into it, and
it really is amazing how you know, I don't want to get political, but how certain people make it into office, and the things that they come up with, their ideas. I mean, something so simple as you know, let these 9/11 families grieve. It's one day a year. They're not protesting down Fifth Avenue. They're not smashing windows. All they want to do is gather at Ground Zero.
They want to honor their family members, and I think that's a great thing.
They get together and they want to, you know, and they want to remember their loved ones. And for anyone to ever deny them that is it's beyond me.
John, do you know Kevin Orenda?
No.
Kevin Orenda was a police officer with me, a made detective, went to the fire department. He's now the mayor of Wall Township. When that happened last year, he got together with a few people, and they have a ceremony now, and they're doing it this year, and they're going to do it every year. They shine the lights up into the sky. I'm not sure if it's in Wall or one of the towns in South Jersey, but Kevin Orenda, good man, he actually invited me to go to it this Saturday. And because of something bad, something good came out of it. A guy, a retired fireman who, you know, cop and fireman, who's now the mayor down there, said, I ain't standing for this. And they did their own ceremony of lights. It turned out that the city caved. Like you said, the Silla Foundation stepped in, was going to do it. They caved. They wound up doing it. But now down in Jersey, so a lot of the people maybe that live in that area, they don't have to go into the city. They can do their, they can do their honoring of the heroes, you know, in that area.
Right, because I mean, people tend to, as the years go on, people, I think more maybe in New York area, you know, it hits us a lot harder, obviously, but people across the country, you know, maybe they need to be reminded sometimes that this was a terrorist attack on our country. You know, this was like an act of war in our country, and it's, you know, I mean, there's, you know, you experience tragedies every day, but this is just, you know, there's a reason that you shouldn't forget this is we have to stay on God. We have to be diligent, and memorizing this every year and having these ceremonies that they have every year is a way of keeping it fresh in everyone's mind.
You know, guys, we're at an hour and 12 minutes, and I think that we're going to do our final words, and then we're just going to, you know, again, 20-year anniversary of 9/11 is this Saturday, and we always want to keep this in everyone's mind. To memorialize the great heroes and all the people that lost their lives that day and people that are still suffering to this day. Phil, final words?
Final words. John, thank you so much for coming on. When Bill and I first started doing this, I told him about you then, and I kept saying, we got to get John on. We got to get John on. So glad you came on. You brought a lot of heroism to the show, and you showed us a different side of things that we might not have been able to do if we just did it ourselves. And thank you. And you know, it's funny, you guys were talking before 9/10. If I would have said that 20 guys were going to get together, hijack planes, and crash them into buildings, you would have probably looked for a straitjacket for me. And now we have post 9/11, and we have to remain diligent, like John said, and especially what went on in Afghanistan recently, and you know, commemorate and celebrate the lives of these people on this coming Saturday, all the heroes that died, and just God bless America.
John, final words?
Thank you guys for having me on. I was happy to do it. Like I said, I'll talk about 9/11 and you know, till my last breath. You know, to keep the memories of all these heroes alive. And just a quick plug to an organization that Phil mentioned earlier called Friends of Firefighters. The story behind that, if we have a few minutes, Bill. This woman came into the firehouse maybe a week or so after 9/11. I happened to be in there. And she comes up to me. She said, "Listen, I live in the neighborhood. I want to help you guys." She goes, I can't give you enough of a monetary donation to really make a difference. She goes, but I can get things done. What can I do to help you? And at that time, all bets were off. You know, we were looking for help any way we could get it, you know? So I said, you want to help us? We need bunting for our firehouse. You know, the purple and black drapes that you put over the firehouse or the precinct when somebody dies. We didn't have any. There wasn't enough to go around. You know, it was all gone. So she drove out to a volley house in Long Island. Someone she knew got the bunting, came back to the fire. She goes, here, you're bunting. What else can I do? And I just gave her one task after the next. No matter what it was, this woman got it done. Her name is Nancy Carbone. And within a year, starting in 2002, she spread to other firehouses, started helping out, got other volunteers to help us. She started her own organization called Friends of Firefighters. It's still going strong today. They basically help active and retired firefighters and their families. I mean, they'll help anybody. You know, you don't have to be a fireman. They'll help anybody. They're very big with therapy, things like that. Anything you need, they're amazing. They can help you with financial things, whatever it is. And if anyone out there is looking to donate to any 9/11 organization, if you go to friendsoffirefighters.org, it's a great organization. Like Phil was saying before, Steve Buscemi is on the board of directors. It's recognized by the whole fire department in New York City, which is an impressive thing because we're close-knit. We don't let outsiders in, but they do great work.
Thank you, John. And folks, if you're not if you're a member of Police Off the Cuff, we applaud you. Thank you so much. We're our channel members, our YouTube subscribers. We're trying to grow this channel as big as we can. That's why I picked Phil straight out of Brooklyn to do these real crime stories. So, folks, on behalf of Police Off the Cuff, I'm Bill Cannon, and for Phil Grimaldi and John Sorrentino, good night.
Stay safe, everybody.